Welcome to one of the most exciting parts of this true story. Stay with us until the end. Amazing events are waiting for you. Out of fear of Hura, Omar no longer dared to spend much time with Ayesha. Whenever Hura saw him playing with his little daughter, Parinaz, or showing kindness to Ayesha, her face would change with jealousy, and in a cold, threatening voice she would say, "If I ever see you caring for them more than you care for me, I'll take your daughter away from you." Her threats became more frequent with each passing day. And Omar slowly realized just how dangerous the woman he had fallen in love with could be. She was no longer the calm, beautiful girl he had first met. Her love had become mixed with jealousy and anger, turning Omar's life into a silent nightmare. Years passed like this. Omar was now 25 years old, but the emotional burden and the double life he was living had made him look much older than his real age. His face always seemed tired, and the brightness in his eyes had slowly faded. During those years, Ayesha had also changed. She was no longer the young village girl she had once been. She had grown into a beautiful, graceful, and kind woman. Every day she tried to win her husband's heart. She prepared his favorite meals, took care of him with love, arranged his clothes, and patiently waited for him every evening, just to spend a few moments beside him. But Omar stayed away from her because he was afraid of Hura. Every evening after closing his jewelry shop, he went straight to the small room at the end of the garden. The room Hura had chosen for herself, and spent most of his time there. Then, for several days, Hura disappeared. Her absence felt strange. Omar wondered if she had finally grown tired of everything and decided never to return. Deep inside, however, he knew that with the love she had for him, it was almost impossible for her to leave forever. He decided to take advantage of those quiet days. For the first time in a long while, he spent time with Ayesha and little Parinaz. He played with his daughter, carried her in his arms, and listened to her innocent laughter. Only then did he realize how beautiful his family life could have been. A happiness he had ignored for years. When Ayesha brought him tea with a gentle smile and Parinaz wrapped her tiny arms around his neck, Omar felt a peace he had not experienced for a very long time. Yet another battle was taking place inside his heart. He still loved Hura. His love for her was real, but continuing this life was becoming impossible. What had Ayesha and little Parinaz done to deserve such suffering? Everyone in the village had already come to one conclusion. They believed Omar had lost his mind. People whispered, "He talks to himself. Sometimes he laughs alone, sometimes he argues with nobody, sometimes he breaks things for no reason." But no one knew the truth. A few nights later, Omar was playing with Parinaz inside the house when he suddenly noticed a familiar shadow standing among the trees in the garden. It was Hura. She silently raised her hand and motioned for him to come outside. Omar gently kissed his daughter's forehead and said, "Daddy will be back soon." Then he quietly walked toward the garden. When he entered the room at the end of the garden, Hura was already waiting for him. Her beauty still took his breath away. The moment he looked into her eyes, all the worries and sadness of the past few days disappeared from his mind. That night they sat together for hours. Hura softly whispered strange words under her breath, words Omar could not understand. Sometimes she looked deeply into his eyes, and sometimes tears rolled down her cheeks. Finally, Omar asked, "Where have you been these past few days?" Hura lowered her head and quietly replied, "I went to see my family." She took a deep breath before continuing. "When they found out that I was living with a human, they cursed me. They told me to return immediately. They said if I refused, they would come here themselves and destroy your life. They said this love could never have a happy ending." Tears filled her eyes. Omar gently embraced her and whispered, "I love you too. Being away from you is painful for me. But maybe we should wait a little longer until we find a solution." Deep inside, however, Omar secretly hoped Hura would choose to leave forever. He believed it might be the only way to save both her and his family. From that night on, Hura often wanted to be alone. She said she needed time to think. Omar respected her wishes. At night, he returned to Ayesha and Parinaz, spending quiet moments beside them, although he always kept a little distance, fearing Hura might become jealous if she ever saw them together. Still, almost every midnight, the sound of Hura crying echoed from the small room at the end of the garden. Her cries were so heartbreaking that they seemed to fill the entire garden with sorrow. Little Parinaz became frightened whenever she heard them and hid in her father's arms. Omar simply whispered, "Don't be afraid, my little girl. It's only the neighbors." But he knew the truth. A few days later, Hura called him again. When Omar entered the room, something about her expression had changed. A gentle smile rested on her face. She looked at him and quietly said, "Omar, I'm pregnant." For several moments, Omar stood completely frozen, his mind filled with countless questions. How was this possible? How could something like this happen? Yet he couldn't bring himself to ask a single one of them. He simply stared at Hura in silence. Inside his mind, only one thought repeated over and over. Why now? Just when we were finally about to say goodbye. Hura lowered her eyes and softly continued. "While I was with my family, I decided that if I had to leave you forever, I wanted to keep a part of you with me." Tears streamed down her face. "I went to one of the elders of my people. I told him everything. He taught me an ancient spell so I could carry your child. A child who would belong completely to my world, so I could take the child with me and raise them. Now, I'm happy that it worked." Omar had no words left. His heart was being torn apart. He still loved Hura, and seeing her cry broke him inside. But he also thought about Ayesha and little Parinaz, who had done nothing wrong. He felt trapped between two worlds, the world of humans and another world filled with mysteries no one could understand. Hura rested her head on Omar's shoulder, and together they cried in silence. Omar felt as though a piece of his own heart was about to be taken away forever. Yet deep inside, he knew that perhaps this painful separation was the only way either of them could ever find peace. This is not the end of the story. An unexpected continuation is on its way that no one could ever imagine.